Hello, everyone. Welcome to our If Not Now, When Part 3 conversation. I'm the founder and CEO for Audelis and Involve. I'm very excited to be hosting this conversation today. Over a year ago, we saw the Black Lives Matter movement truly go global. While the movement itself has been gaining momentum since 2013, the murderer George Floyd sent shockwaves across the world and sounded a call to action that could no longer be ignored. Over the course of a year, we've seen a shift towards conversation, education, accountability, and the much needed realization that things must change. So what has actually changed? How have businesses responded to this call to action? And what more do we need to do? Following parts 1 and 2 of our If Not Now, When series, in part 3 today, we'll be discussing whether we've seen adequate action over the last year and what work businesses still have to do to drive Black inclusion in the workplace. The question still remains, if not now, when? So we have an incredible lineup of speakers. I feel incredibly honored and proud to be able to host this group of awesome people. And we're going to get into intros quite quickly because we've got a lot of different questions to cover, but we do want this to be as interactive as possible. So please do put your questions in the chat function and we will do our best to put them to the panelists. So I'm going to head straight into intros and let's start with, I'm going to go with the tiles on my screen. So Wayma, you're first. Intros, please.
Yes. Well, thank you, Suki. It is a pleasure to be here today amongst my esteemed colleagues and new colleague, Carlos. And I think it's so important that we come back and not let this conversation go. For me, what has changed is that there has been an evolution, and we're not only seeing what organizations are doing, but we're seeing the pressure that is happening externally. Things like in the US, voter suppression laws happening within the states, the debate on critical race theory, and even talking about racism and historical discrimination. And so there is almost this swelling of the necessity to educate, to understand, and to drive systemic change. And I think that that is making our roles so much even more important and critical for us to make sure our leaders understand this and that we embrace, we engage, we empower, and we allow for these conversations and dialogues to continue so that our organizations can truly reflect the values and the culture that we want to maintain.
Fantastic. Thank you, Wayma. Over to Erica, who's giving me some serious glasses game.
Thank you, Suki, and hi, everyone. It's really great to be back for part 3 of this dialogue, and even the ongoing nature of this dialogue implies that it continues. You know, I think we all talked about turning this into a movement versus a moment, and I think everyone has had a fear that it's like a one and done. We were going to just hear about it last year, and by 2021, it'd be a distant memory. But I do think racial equity is a conversation that continues and at leadership tables of companies around the world. You know, one update I would give everyone, you may have noticed my title has changed. So previously I had the privilege of addressing this conversation from the lens of being the Chief Diversity Officer at Goldman Sachs. And now I am the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer and Global Head of Talent at Citi. So really excited about my new role. I'm in the second week of my tenure at Citi. But as you can imagine, in our past conversations, we've talked about the fact that this is a large-scale global conversation. And I do feel like I am now leading the efforts at a large-scale global firm, and being able to marry topics of diversity, equity, inclusion with our own talent strategy. And that to me is super powerful when you think about the future leadership of a firm like Citi around the globe, among other elements of the talent piece of my role. So just really excited to have this dialogue today, to be in this company, and hopefully to continue to spark you know, shine a light on this topic, and also spark an ember, you know, underneath everybody that's participating in this dialogue. But this is not over. The problem has not been solved.
Yeah.
You know, this cannot be one and done, and we all have to keep on pushing.
And Erica, congrats on the new role, by the way, and also incredible
Thank
to
you.
be working for the first Wall Street bank with a female CEO.
Yes.
So bravo to that, quite frankly. So very excited.
With a genuine commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
It sounds weird to saying that actually in 2021 that she's the first woman CEO of a Wall Street bank. It's great to celebrate it, but also really sad it's taken that long, quite frankly. So, but great news. So next is Sandra.
Hello, everyone. It's really wonderful to be back again with the crew, Erica and Rima, and joining us today, of course, Carlos. There's been a lot that's been going on. I did get an elevation to the Chief Diversity Officer title since we were together. This has been quite a journey. The pandemic has layered on so much, but you know what? I really feel like it was a trigger, along with certainly the sadness of George Floyd's murder, but it has lifted people to a level of engagement that we have not seen in my life. And I will say that I think it is evolving. I feel people are feeling more courageous of having this conversation, and that no, they don't want to go back. And that's a good thing. And I think we have the opportunity to certainly take advantage of that and educate people and lift ours as we educate, and that we do not lose that as we are doing this work. I focus a lot on the people, and I feel very strongly about people having a foundation to start the conversation. So I've been doing a lot of work in terms of what that conversation is like.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, so I'm glad to have this conversation today as well.
Well, congrats on your new title.
Thank
Sandra,
you.
very deserved. And I'm loving the room divider behind you as well, very stylish and fabulous. And joining as a newbie to the OGs of this If Not Now When panel is Carlos. Carlos, do you want to tell everyone out there who you are and what you do?
Am I off mute?
Yeah.
Well, glad to be a part, and thanks for the invite. And Suki, since we've connected, you're a force to be reckoned with. So I love working with you and appreciate the work that you and your team is doing. But I am the Global Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at Walgreen Boots Alliance. We are a healthcare destination that does business in 20 plus countries, 440,000 employees across the globe. And I am happy to be a part of this conversation. And I guess as we get more into the conversation, I'll tell you a little bit more about the work that we're doing and just some of the challenges that still exist in this space. But I've been with the company 4 years and we've seen significant changes in growth in that time. So.
Fantastic. Well, great to have you on board, Carlos. Thank you for joining us. So everyone watching, please do think about your questions, post them in the chat function. We'll try and put them to the panelists. I'm going to go to the first question. So we're a year on since the murder of George Floyd. When it comes to business, what are the biggest changes you've seen over the year? Has anything actually really changed? Sandra, can we come to you first?
Sorry, didn't unmute. The greatest awareness of social justice, I think, has happened. And not that it wasn't before, but it is a different feel. When I talk to a lot of people, they do feel like this is different, and it has not sort of gone back as usual. So the social justice, and of course, all consumers holding businesses responsible for action. And this is not a time that you can sort of put it on the shelf and not pay attention to it. Your business literally depends on it. There are lots of statements, of course, and commitments to DE&I. Certainly all of that has to pan out, and people need to watch that. For us at Nielsen, the knowledge that these statements have to translate really into real action. It cannot any longer be flavor of the month. We need to focus on continuing to educate people, and with that, have action.
Yeah. No, fantastic. Waymo, what about you? What's the last year been for you in terms of seeing change?
Yeah, I think with the change, there is a recognition that we can't go at it alone, that we have to actually bring in partnerships with advocacy organizations, with other organizations within the same industry. And really with that change, making sure that it distills down to tangible actions within our organizations. So that translates into leadership accountability. How are we ensuring that our aspirations and our ambitions through racial equity commitments really come to have the impact that we want through the conditions and the work environment that our employees are experiencing? And now more than ever, I see within my organization and also in Santa Fe as a chief diversity officer, the accountability piece has been so much greater. And also thinking about how do we evolve that so that, yes, we start with metrics and accountability now, but how does that really play into a leadership expectation so that it doesn't have to be, just forceful, but something that our leaders and our managers see the value in and do naturally.
Fantastic. And Erica, what have you kind of see change in the last year specifically?
Sure. I do think the hiring landscape for Black talent has changed.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a very active and robust market. I think market value has gone up, which I think is fantastic. And perhaps maybe it's just a normalization, but still an opportunity to increase the earning potential of highly talented Black individuals and increase the options that they have. So, that focus, are seeing more targeted development programs for Black talent as well over the last year. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention a focus not only on racial equity and anti-racism, and I know we'll talk about that a little bit more later, but also recognizing the Asian population and understanding that there is racism and clear diversity and inclusion concerns for that population. So I do want to make sure that we don't lose that in the overall context of the last year.
Yeah.
We're seeing more Blacks being put on boards. So that's something else that I think firms have been intentional around, and also you have like large clients that are really pushing for board diversity.
Yeah.
So I've seen that. And the last thing I'll share is that, there is a recognition, I think, for the need for investment and support of Black entrepreneurs and Black businesses.
Yeah.
And more so than I think ever before, or what might have been viewed as a category within supplier diversity.
Yeah, no, fantastic. And Carlos, what about you? What have you seen at Walgreens Boots Alliance in the last year? What's changed?
Well, it's interesting as I listen to the other three panelists speak. I mean, those are they've already articulated some of the things, but as I think about my company, we've had a change at the top. We've hired our first African-American female CEO, which was groundbreaking, and I think a very momentous a moment for the organization, and it shook the nation. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. We saw our stock. We talk about research and data all the time about how having a female leader, you have better stock results, better market visibility, higher productivity. And we see that on paper. But when Roz was announced, that next day our stock shot up. Now, this is just Carlos speaking here. I'm not speaking on behalf of the company, but we saw that. And our stock has been pretty steady since she's been on board, right? We also saw every news outlet, every media outlet, every corporation want to talk and speak to Roz Brewer because of what she brought to the table. We also had another first last year, and that's we added Valerie Jarrett from the Obama administration to our board of directors. Mm-hmm. And the response to those two moves alone, and there have been many others, but those two moves alone, folks have said Walgreens gets it. We don't know what happened over the last several years, but those two moves were iconic for an organization as big and powerful as Walgreens Boots Alliance. We also saw more awareness of the problems that exist in corporate America and the world today because people are talking about it. What was taboo a year and a half ago is now common conversation in corporate America today. I think Erica said it, but we want to make sure this isn't just a moment. One of the panelists said, I think it was you, Erica, but that this is a movement and that it lasts.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling that this is going to stick around for a while because what's happening at our company and many other practitioners that I talk to is people in the organization that were kind of blind to this subject is now starting the conversation. They're asking us for our account consultation. They're asking us to be a part of their meetings. They want to know what they need to do differently. They're engaging DE&I more than I've ever seen DE&I engage before. And the other thing that I'm seeing, and I'll let you get to the next question, is we are now at the table in conversations where they used to close the door when they saw it's coming. So now they're saying, we need you here to help us solve this very complex problem. So I'll pause there, but I think those are some of the things that I've seen change in the last year and a half, and hopefully they will last for a while.
I think Erica's got something to say. Erica, go.
One thing also, just, you know, that you made me think of when you started talking about leadership. And we touched on this the last time, but it's really come to fruition at this point, which is the number of chief diversity officer roles that have sprung up. Now, all chief diversity officer roles have not been created equally.
Correct.
So that's a topic for further discussion. But the fact that, you know, companies are looking for leaders, subject matter experts when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and many companies have really positioned leaders to be truly C-suite leaders, engaging with the EMT, the board, et cetera. You know, there really has been a shift. You know, some people have just put people in roles. Some firms, let's be clear. You know, so just having a figurehead doesn't mean that you get the impact and from the work or the role, but the number of open roles that we had sort of referenced in the last conversation to what has been filled and where you see even movement in the space, it's been highly trafficked.
I mean, we can testify that being a global search firm, the number of CDO searches we've done in the last year has been phenomenal. So there is a huge focus on the C. Actually, I know this is slightly off script because we're talking about it now, but do you find, because of the focus on the CDO seat, do you find there's more pressure? Are you finding it a tougher job because there is such a laser focus on DEI in business at the moment? Wayma, would love to.
Yeah, if I may, I do think that it is not so much pressure, but there is an appetite for a quick solution. So it's like, okay, what can you give us as a quick fix? And I think that that is where our jobs become very, very, very important in ensuring that we don't actually offer some kind of solutions that'll just a cure for all, but really take the time to say, what is it that we're doing? Let's look at our systemic environment. Let's look at our processes. Let's look at our policies. Not only, you know, doing the hiring and bringing people in, but really giving them a safety net so that they can be successful, right? How are we ensuring that the onboarding is effective? Because we know the research shows that Black and brown people, and the more senior they are in the organization, the probability of their success is lower. And so that is where I think it's also kind of come to us as quick fixes. How do we actually ensure that we have something that we can say that is going to make a change, but really saying that what can be foundational, what can actually be done that actually can build those practices that will be the fabric of how you operate.
And actually, Erica raised a really interesting point with the CDO role. They're not all equal. For instance, we won't take on a brief for a CDO role if there isn't that infrastructure and resources for the candidate.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, what's the point? Like,
absolutely.
What is the person going to get? If it's a global business and you've got this one person, what are they going to do on their own? Like, yes, you're not setting them up.
You can't. The answer is you're not able to. You're not going to be able to.
What can you do exactly? Okay, I mean, we've got so many questions. I might go straight into the audience questions because there's some really good ones here. So Bobby Wilkinson has asked, he's curious if you're seeing or feeling pushback from peers, specifically white peers, with equity, and specifically their denial that people of color and women lack workplace equity. If so, how are you addressing those kind of conversations? Sandra.
Well, first of all, I was actually trying to unmute to follow up on the CDO piece, but okay. No, we are very much focused on equity, because if you don't have equity and the resources to make sure that people are supported, that's a problem. We are not. It's kind of faking it, and I don't believe that if you're going to have a successful initiative, programs, however you want to land this plane, you have to support the people so that they can be successful in your organization. That is probably one of the things that is most painful when you ask about becoming a CDO at a company. What, you know, who do you report to? What is the budget? Who are the people that are going to help make this successful? Because this will not be me landing the plane.
Yeah.
It has to be a group of leadership that is supporting this, that is supporting the programs that are required. And to those who ask about the equity, I'm all about, you know, it's almost we're at reparation time. There are things that have to be supported. There are skill sets that have to be supported when you want people to have a trajectory in your organization. And there are people who have not been raised in families or in surroundings where people can just tell you what's the secret sauce, what's sort of behind the wall. There has to be that kind of equity so that when I do advance, I am actually going to be successful.
Yeah.
And there are many other things that we can, you know, talk about in that realm, but those things have to happen.
No, great.
It has to happen.
Because I suppose it's almost, how do you tackle those difficult conversations with those that don't believe that there is an equity issue with the Black community in business, I think is what the question is asking. Like, have you experienced that, and how are you tackling those tough conversations? Carlos, anything to add?
Oh my God, daily. I get pushed back across the organization, and you know, we're going to be, we're amongst family and friends here. So, you know, folks have come up to me and said, this is reverse discrimination. You know, I mean, and these are senior leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And I push back with data and information, and I talk to them about just, you know, history, about how certain things have been unequal for so long. And we're not talking about equality, we're talking about equity. And then have to explain to them what equity actually means and how you apply that in corporate America. This work is not about creating advantages for Black and brown people. It's about removing disadvantages so that we can compete on a level playing field, right?
Yeah.
Too often folks want to send me out to pick apples. I'm 5 feet tall, but the apple tree is 7 feet tall, right? And I'm competing against someone that's 7 foot tall that can reach up and pick those apples and doesn't need any assistance. Give me the ladder and I'll be just as productive. That's equity. Give me the tools that I need in order to be successful, and then I'll do the rest.
So it's almost making it real for them. So it's because I think we use the word equity a lot, and a lot of people don't understand what it means.
They don't. Like they equate it to equal. They equate it to equality every single time. And they'll say, what's the difference? And I'll ask, how much time do you have? Because there's a huge difference.
Yeah,
absolutely. So that's my piece. To answer your question, yes, it happens every day. And we combat that with data and facts and having that tough conversation around why it's necessary.
No, absolutely. So next question for me, do you think businesses are yet doing enough to drive change? And is that change occurring fast enough? Wayma, any comments?
Absolutely. I think businesses are doing a lot. I think that there could be more? Absolutely. If you think about legislation such as the Crown Act, right, which was actually started by Dove, and that is a legislation that has passed here in the US in 14 states that prohibits discrimination against hair texture and hairstyles. And that was really led, and a lot of organizations led that to talk about how are we creating systemic change outside in our communities. What I think that needs to be done is as we are making the commitments and we have these external ambitions, really ensuring that when we are having the targets, which I think is absolutely necessary because what's measured gets done, that we equate it to how are we then making sure that going back to the equity question, that we create the conditions for success, that we create the conditions that we're just not kind of picking from the tree outside, but ensuring that there's pathways for growth for our internal talent, and that we are literally taking this as a homegrown internal cultural transformation. Because if in absence of that, it may transition to being just a one-time, kind of one and done, fix it, that will not have the impact and the change that is needed to really drive progress within our organizations. I also think really partnering along industry. So if you think about, within the finance industry, the partnerships they have done, I think one of the successful partnerships is LGBT. I know in tech, we are doing more around Black in tech and focusing on women in tech. I think that the same thing is happening in pharma. That is a critical next juncture that has started, but I do think the momentum there needs to happen. And that is really where we're going to actually have shared progress and really be able to see that impact and those specific actions and things that will create change and opportunity for Black and brown people.
Yeah. Erica, anything more to add about how we could accelerate change? Like what other interventions could we do, for instance?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of companies are doing a lot, right? When you say enough, just to get to the initial question, right? How you defined enough? Is it ever enough, right? So I think there is a lot that is happening. I think that there are firms that have really set goals and key milestones. I think that keeps organizations honest in trying to move along the continuum and make progress. And I'm always an advocate for sustainable progress, right? It's like you don't want to have work happen, or people come in but your attrition is still going out, or so you want that sustainable progress. But I think in order to really accelerate, like anything, any initiative, you need the accountability.
Yeah.
And leadership accountability at every level. And we've also talked about middle managers before, right? That becomes the biggest challenge because, we have to hold leaders at every level of the firm, not just the senior most leaders who, for progressive firms, at a city, they get that, right? But at every level, how do we make sure there's that same level of accountability, just like any other business goal? I've always talked about diversity as a business, right? And I've always talked about metrics, that which gets measured gets done. So, so how we track the progress, some firms, have done annual goals, some have done goals out, 5 years, 10 years, but are those just, are firms just kicking the can down the road, or are they really making their way towards those goals? No, and that to me is one thing that we have to make sure that we build into the accountability for all the promises that have been made. I mean, firms have made a lot of promises and a lot of commitments, but for the capital you said you were going to invest, how much has been invested? For the suppliers that you said you were going to use, what has been that supplier spend? I was so pleased to find out that Citi has already exceeded its commitment for supplier diversity spend for Black owned businesses. And that's a multi-year commitment, so that has already been exceeded. So I think you just have to track that progress and keep people honest to whatever goals have been put forward, and not allow it to be a can that gets kicked down the road and people hope that those commitments have been forgotten by the time they get to the point where they haven't achieved those goals.
Well, I mean, to be fair, they'll also be called out for it, which is what happened last month. There was some research that showed these big commitments they made about funding advocacy organizations in the Black community, for instance, and it was a tiny amount of money that actually reached them, which was quite shocking, but they were publicly called out. And actually, following on from that, there's a great question from Helen Hanamy here. Sandra, I'm going to come to you with this. What she's asking is, are you having discussions in your companies about corporates staying in their lane versus driving wider change in society? I think what she's saying is when and where to speak out and take action. Like, what is the role of corporates on this issue?
So for Nielsen, we, of course, are research and measurement. And two things, the media industry, we have influence here. We were talking about our new values as we stand up our company, because we separated our companies back in January.
Yeah.
The new values are inclusion, courage, and growth. So inclusion being the first was intentional. It's our commitment to DE&I, putting that as the first to influence change in our industry. There are two things. Advertising is the greatest source of revenue. Our ads, advertising ads inadvertently funding, are they funding discrimination? We did a small custom study that shows that we found over 60 brands advertising in digital news sites that used hate terms. And this is information that inadvertently they don't really know, but you can inform them so that they are more aware of where they're placing their ads. Then content, their stories that we see and characters we watch and shape those beliefs and can break the bias. So we have a product, Inclusion Analytics. This data shows that the overall share of screen time for Black talent on television is often at, is above they are at or above the presence in the US population. Now, however, when we look at it closer, the strong representation is led by the presence of Black men and reveals an underrepresentation of Black women. I'm saying all of this to say, yes, we have responsibility to call these things out, because that is the beginning of stereotyping.
Yeah.
You put Black men in violent cop shows, so that's all that you see. That is making up in children's minds in particular, that's it. So we're investing here and investing in the representation content and the advertising. So those are things that are very powerful, and we plan to stay the course on this.
Thanks, Sandra. And Carlos, what about in WBA, that kind of impact in society? What have WBA been doing perhaps in the last year?
Well, really, I mean, if you think about WBA, we're a consumer-based organization, right? I mean, we don't exist if folks don't come into our store and buy our products and services. So one of the things is that we wanted to make sure that we trained our associates on providing extreme customer care, making sure everyone that walked into our doors felt welcome. So we trained all of our leaders on unconscious bias, conscious bias, and really how to interact with the public. You know, again, when I think about Walgreens Boots Alliance, you know, I celebrate the company, but also hold it accountable when it falls short, right? And we fell short in our training, and so we corrected that. You know, we've also had folks that have contacted us to the earlier part of your question and said, hey, we don't need you in politics and social justice issues. Stick to diapers and drugs. Push, you know, pills and Pampers. Stay out of stay in your lane. But we're part of the community, and our lane is, if it affects society, it affects us as a company. So we can no longer have that line that says what happens outside doesn't come inside, because every one of our employees come from outside, right? Yeah. So we've also, if you think about the pandemic and the havoc that has wreaked on society as a whole, Walgreens was very instrumental in getting the vaccine out there, making sure that we set up clinics in Black and brown neighborhoods across the country. I have probably been spending the last 6-8 weeks on the road every weekend in a different major city with our vaccine equity clinic to make sure that we're putting shots in arms in Black and brown neighborhoods, partnering with Uber to provide free rides to clinics. We partner with Uber to give 10 million free rides. We've worked with churches, the Urban League, to set up clinics at churches and pastors in their backyard and in their communities. And right now we've done almost 9 million vaccines in Black and brown communities across the US, because it's important that we not just make the vaccine available, but we make it available in those vulnerable areas and those medically underserved areas. So those are just some of the things. But to your question, people tell us all the time, stay in your lane and stay out of these issues. You have no place there, but that is our place.
Yeah, absolutely. It blurs, right, the line. I think, Erica, you want to add something?
Yeah, I think it's important to say that, you know, employees want to work for companies that their values are aligned, right? And companies have tremendous platforms, and CEOs have tremendous platforms to leverage. And there have been several instances where the CEOs have used their platforms not only to speak on the issue, but also to let employees know where they stand, which is very important as employees go through trauma, the trauma of the last year. So there is somewhat of, there's a responsibility to shareholders, but it's not devoid of social responsibility as well, you know, and I think that that's important. And, you know, I think there are organizations like the Business Roundtable that have said, yes, we should have a voice on these issues, right? Some of the most powerful CEOs from, you know, around the globe. And I think when you think overall around, you know, diversity, equity, inclusion across dimensions, certainly in the gender space, there are some countries where you see the government taking the lead, and there are some countries where, you know, you see corporations take the lead. And certainly in the past environment where our government was not taking the lead, you know, there was a real gap, an open space that I do think a lot of companies actually stepped up and filled.
Agreed. There's a great question here actually from Sarah Abbasi, which kind of links a little bit to your comment earlier about kind of intersectionality, Erica. What she's asking is, how have the events of the past year, when you think about the pandemic, George Floyd, BLM, Stop Asian Hate, Free Palestine, lots of different intersections and challenges in different demographics, how has that impacted your own approach to DEI within your respective roles? Like, have you had to adapt your approach to meet the needs of so many different demographics? Wayma, can I come to you first?
Yes, absolutely. I think that's a great question. And absolutely. And it has forced us to adapt, me specifically, because it has allowed me and really put in place the need for creating a sense of belonging. You know, these are shared experiences that are happening, you know, on different spectrums, right? With xenophobia and Asian hate, with the violence against, you know, racial injustice and violence against Black. Even with LGBT, we're still seeing, you know, commitments of that within our communities. But that is actually creating more of a platform and a need to have connected, engaged communities within our organizations, for having them seeing how they can work collectively together to really create that sense of belonging, that inclusive environment, and the need to say, okay, this is my experience, and this may be happening outside the doors, but when I come in, I need to feel like not only can I be my full self, but I'm able to what we talked about earlier, the trauma, understand that has happened. And so these are the conditions that needs to be made so for me to be able to bring my best and perform at my best. And that's where our focus is really on that sense of belonging. What does that look like? How do we create space to understand, hear, listen to trauma, but also educate, right? And really, this is where the allyship piece comes in so strongly, because what I have found also in this time, there has been tremendous outpouring for the majority group to say, how are we supporting? What can we do? And then what I have been counseled is like, you know, you have to be careful with that, right? That you're not putting the burden on those that have felt the pain and trauma, because now they are not only dealing with their hurt, but they have the expectation to drive the healing process, to be the helpers within corporations, within our communities. And so at some point, and I think that was one of the questions, but how do we allow there to be resources that the organization takes and say, okay, if you want to educate yourself, this is how, this is what you do, and this is what it looks like when you come into working with your teams, working with the organization, promoting and discussing leadership styles, talent, seeking talent. And so I think that is where it has shifted and really become more palatable in terms of the change. It's really around those shared experiences and creating that sense of belonging.
I think it's really interesting you say about getting the majority to step forward and educate. Because remember the last conversation we had, how you were all pretty much finding it quite exhausting, having to educate and tell people what to do. Like the onus is on the individuals to learn themselves, be it a non-Black person, including brown people that need to learn more about the Black experience and Black issues. How do we get the majority to do more and to act more in an anti-racist way? Like those kind of behaviors that are really important. Sandra, would you like to take that? You just went on to mute.
Right, okay. Sorry about that. You know what? There is a lot hanging here. There's a lot hanging, and there are some low-hanging fruit that we can deal with. But remember, people have been socialized this way all their lives. And this is not just going to be uncorked suddenly. So we're talking hundreds of years of people just behaving the way that they behave, knowing what they know. And it does require, whether we're fatigued or not, that we answer some questions. Does not mean I'm going to be the encyclopedia, does not mean that I'm going to be Google. It means that I'm going to give you some information. We created a anti-race site, intrasite. Their books, their podcasts, there are all kinds of resources for people to look up. We have book clubs. We have people who actually have done their own thing, where in different divisions, they had a book club. They had a unconscious bias sort of, it was a puzzle that they created. There are people who are actually doing things to have this conversation. So we meet halfway. And I think that part of that is we cannot be excluded from the conversation. We have to be in the conversation so that we can guide people to reality. What is my reality versus your reality? If we don't have that, we are not going to get to that real, genuine, authentic self coming. Because otherwise we're going to fake it too. I don't want to show up as an imposter. I want you to know your reality. I
know, Sandra, you have a great list of resources, which actually, if you don't mind, with your permission, we could share with all the people that registered for this event, so they have it, and we'll make sure it's credited to you. Erica, I think you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I mean, Wayma just, that was a drop the mic answer. The one thing I would, point out is we don't just have to get the majority engaged, right? We should, that's definitely a must. It shouldn't just be, the Black folks, teaching folks or trying to draw people in to care about Black racial equity. But I think, when you think about the ecosystem that you just described and so many different pieces to the puzzle, including Stop Asian Hate, et cetera, like we all have to be allies, right? Across communities. To, the point that Sandra was making, like we all have to educate ourselves. We all have some level of privilege, and how we use that for others, how we speak up, right? Silence is endorsement. So whether or not, it's your dimension of diversity or some other dimension of diversity, the concept of allyship, allies for inclusion, right? Not LGBT allies, not allies for racial equity, allies for inclusion, I think is a really powerful concept in the current environment. And yes, we have to provide people with the tools. There's lots that they can do on their own to educate themselves, but within our own environments, we have the benefit of providing tools and resources. And I think I shared this on the last one that we did. But one of the things I'm proud of as I have exited Goldman Sachs is the reverse mentoring program that we implemented, because to Sandra's point, people have to understand the lived experiences of the groups that are being marginalized, right? And in the case of the reverse mentoring program we implemented at Goldman, it was specific to the Black community. And those lived experiences are not commonly understood and really were often not spoken about. I think I know for me personally, until last year, I didn't feel like sharing those experiences would be of any consequence, right? You know, and even could potentially be misunderstood.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think that because of some, you know, there was some level of awakening, that sharing those lived experiences was really helping to inform an important dialogue, an uncomfortable dialogue that needed to be had for people to deepen their understanding and be better allies, you know, in this case to the Black community. But I think allyship, to Wayma's point, is so important, and it's across dimensions, however we use whatever privilege we have to, you know, use our power for others.
Absolutely. I'm conscious, I remember Sandra asked at the beginning or before we started, is this an hour or 2 hours? And I said it was an hour, but we've only got 9 minutes left. We probably should have done it for 2 hours, which means we're going to need If Not Now When Part 4. So I'm already pitching that right now to all 4 of you with now a new edition Carlos. So none of you can say no. But I want to try and end with 2 questions. The first one, because we want the audience to take action. And we want them to take action on things that work. So it's great hearing about reverse mentoring, and you might have something else as well, Erica. But it'd be great to know, in the last year, what is the one intervention you've seen has had like the greatest impact to drive Black inclusion and diversity? Carlos, can we start with you?
Wow. So one of the things that we did, I think that had, I don't know if it's the biggest impact, but had a major impact, is we started a series inside of our company called Listen, Learn, and Act.
Yeah.
It was a global piece where it was really a forum for our employees to come together with issues that were on their mind. We created a safe space. We set parameters going in about a no judgment zone. And we talked about real issues with our leaders. And we had our leaders listen, right, to the employees so that they can learn, so that we could take action. And so we did that globally across the organization. And each time we do it, the audience gets bigger and bigger. And the feedback that we're getting from that is, thank you, Walgreens, for doing this. It gives me a voice. I feel like I'm now a part of the company. My voice matters. I feel more engaged. And one of the things that I think all companies should do is listen to what's going on inside their workplace with their employees. If we truly believe that notion that our employees are our greatest asset, then let's start treating them like that.
Yeah,
it's a nice tagline, but let's put words to action. And so when we do that, it's amazing what's the return that we're starting to get from that. That's just one thing, and I'll defer to the other panelists for others. That's from.
No, great. Sandra, what's the one thing in the last year that's had the most impact for Black inclusion?
Well, I'm going to ditto Carlos, because we did the same thing. We went through all of our BRGs, and we had open conversation. The floor was theirs. It is for them to inform us, where are you? Have you been seen? Are you visible? What is it that you need in order for you to be visible and to be successful? That is a lot of data, and the leaders were listening. The leaders were open to their own change, because we had one session with them called Courageous Conversation, where they had to peel it back. They had to come into a reality that they had not been in before, and they were appreciative of sort of pulling this down so that I can open up and be the person that I am. We learned things from these leaders we did not know. It became very personal. And so I think that set things in motion to know I have to listen to people.
Yeah.
I included in my mantra for the year is I see you, because I want people to know that they are valuable. As Carlos said, that asset, absolutely, they are valuable. So that's what we did.
No, fantastic. Yeah, Carlos.
3 seconds. One of the things that people often fail to realize when they go and spend, and no disrespect to consultants, but when you spend hundreds and millions of dollars on consultants, we have 440,000 consultants on our payroll, and that's our employees. And when we listened to them, the information that we got was so valuable, no consultant could have pulled that out of them, none. And so we utilize that to help us solve complex business problems. I just wanted to add that, 'cause I think that's
Carlos, I think Involve could do a pretty good job. We're a great diversity and inclusion consultancy. Thank you very much. Wayma, what about you? The one thing that's had a real impact on Black inclusion?
Yes, absolutely. I would have to say overwhelmingly is the re-recruitment and re-engagement of Black talent, specifically our senior talent. Looking at them and recognizing, one, to Erica's point, the market, it's hot. They are they're a la mode, right? They are, the Black talent is being sought after, feverishly by across all industries. So we wanted to really take efforts to re-recruit them. So looking at how are we bringing them together across their different product areas, having discussions with them, really addressing the very relevant and specific challenges or obstacles that they actually have, and put processes and policies and tactics in place to making sure that they have the engagement, they have the inclusion and the empowerment. And some of the outcomes of that has been everywhere from expanded mentorship, networking groups have been, leadership coaching, executive coaching, but it has been specific and it has been relevant. But it's really with the mindset of delighting and stopping and pausing and saying, yes, what we're doing externally is important, but we also have to take care of home. And I think that has been kind of the most significant effort that I'm most proud of.
No, fantastic. And just to clarify, so when you say re-recruitment, do you mean in engaging your
re-engagement? So really going specifically to Black talent and having the hands-on high touch with our senior leaders, with our Black talent.
Perfect. No, fantastic. That's really helpful. Thank you. Erica, I know you talked about reverse mentoring. Is there anything else that you think's had a huge impact in the last year?
So the answer is D, all of the above. I think everyone here has said it really well. I'll remind folks that that which gets measured gets done. So I still really champion, setting aspirational goals and metrics. I love what Wayma said around re-engaging and investing in Black talent. And you've seen a lot of programs, both facilitated by consultancies, as well as in-house, as well as people like at Citi, we engage with ELC around a lot of programming for developing Black talent, and have a program called Owning My Success. So you see a lot of effort focusing on developing, retaining, and promoting Black talent. And again, that feeds into achieving certain goals, especially when they're set at higher levels and not just the entry level. That's the continuum, not just bringing folks in, right? That's just the diversity, but you still got to get to equity and inclusion, which is a much more holistic measure of success and sustainability for Black talent at our firms. So, even the fact that we can just really call out and speak to Black talent is, again, a big change over the last year and a half. And a welcome one. And it doesn't marginalize or make any group less important, but it adds Black to a dialogue that really, we weren't using that word or that, or really framing the issue specifically for that one diverse group at our companies.
Now we have less than 2 minutes. So my final question, you have less than 20, 30 seconds per person. I'll be cutting you off if you go beyond that, is what is your one last bit of advice for people watching on this session right now for them to take action? Wayma, let's start with you.
So just quickly, I cannot reiterate enough, really create the platform to talk about the shared experiences as a collective. Use that to really set expectations and really encourage that sense of belonging, that ownership. And also for the DEI practitioners, put in place things like the anti-racism training, things that those that are allies and want to help can do themselves. Thank you.
Wayma, but very good advice. Sandra, what about you?
This is an individual call out. Be visible, be vocal, be an implementer of change, understand your bias, and change it. Change it.
Here. And that was very well timed. Well done, Sandra. And Carl,
Stay true to yourself, be authentic.
absolutely. And Erica, last but by no means least.
Same thing I always say, use your voice, silence is endorsement.
Absolutely. I mean, we could have honestly talked for another hour, and thank you all so much for joining us. I mean, if we had the audience, everyone would be clapping, so I'll do it for you. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. This has been recorded, so we will share it with everyone that registered and send it to everyone. We'll send that resources list of resources from you, Sandra, which I thought was really great when I've seen it before, just to remind people of it. But thank you for joining us. A huge thank you to our panelists. And there's lots of love for part 4 already, just to be clear in the chat function. Everyone wants it. So we're gonna have to. Nice to see you all. Have a good day. Take care. Bye.